Okay, I think we can get this thing moving. Welcome everybody to our final session of the Exploring History and Cultural in Central Minnesota for 2023 with the Hmong Cultural Center. I'm Caitlin Carlson. I'm the program director here at the Stearns History Museum. I just want to thank Anne-Marie for pulling this thing together once again, Anne-Marie Johnson, who works with us here at the Stearns History Museum. Most of you, I don't know, have been to, these sessions in the last few weeks, but I just want to thank our sponsors, Sourcewell, Wingnut Tattoo, Mid-Minnesota Federal Credit Union, Bezic Family Dentistry. Obviously, I want to thank the Hmong Cultural Center for preparing these presentations, which have been so interesting. And then, of course, the Hmong Student Organization at St. Cloud State University. Today's chat moderator is Mina. So if you have questions, please just put them in the chat and Mina will present them to Shangpao after his presentation. So let's see, anything else with that said? Oh, I also want to introduce Grace, who is our tech support today. You'll hear from her briefly for any tech questions and needs you might have. But I'm just gonna shoot it over to Mary Otsby over at Benton County. And she'll just give a quick intro of our presenters today.
Hi, I'm Mary Osby with the Benton County Historical Society. Don't have a real good voice, Caitlin. I think I'm going to let you probably do all the presenters. Thanks to everyone who's participating today and all the other weeks, and special thanks to Caitlin and Grace who are covering.
Yeah, so today's speakers, you've seen them the last 3 weeks. We've got Shangpao. Oh, sorry, Mary, still talking. We've got Shangpao Li, who's been the executive director at the Hmong Cultural Center since 2002. He moved to Minnesota with his family in 1984 as a refugee. And serves as a Hmong marriage ritualist in the Hmong community of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and is an active leader in the Lee Clan Association of Minnesota. Shangpao was a 2022 recipient of a Facing Race Award from the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. And then, of course, Dr. Mark Pfeiffer, who's been the director of programs at the Hmong Cultural Center since 2000, and he also manages the museum there. He holds a doctorate in geography from the University of Toronto, a master's in urban studies from Temple University, and a master's in library science from the University of North Texas. He's also a lecturer in anthropology for the State University of New York Institute of Technology and Empire State College in New York State, and has been the editor of the Hmong Studies Journal since 2003. And today we're going to talk about Hmong 101 Minnesota Milestones, which is going to feature the history of the Hmong in Minnesota and Hmong contributions to the state. So we're going to highlight the diversity of the Hmong community within Minnesota, where we have one of the largest Hmong populations of the United States. So part of the Hmong Cultural Center's groundbreaking Hmong 101 workshops and webinars, the program was created in response to a need for community education about the Hmong refugee experience, Hmong history and culture, and Hmong American contributions to the United States. The Cultural Center's comprehensive, interactive, multicultural education presentations about the Hmong are provided across the nation and have been used for anti-discrimination seminars and trainings throughout the Midwest. Okay, so with all that said, I'm going to hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin, and we are going to be presenting together today. This is Dr. Pfeiffer. So I'm not going to show my screen here because I've had a lot of flickering issues with my screen recently, and so I'm going to keep that off. But I'm going to share the PowerPoint here. So give me a moment here to do that. Oh, I need it to be enabled though. I got a message that it's disabled, the host disabled participant screen sharing. So I need the share screen to be enabled.
Okay, try again. I just clicked it. Sorry about that.
There we go. I see it now.
Great. Like last week, I'm sorry that not make it. I tried to get in, but I'm not able to get in. So today, Mark and myself, we need to make sure we are all together today. So any question, please feel free to ask me or Mark.
Yes, and I also want to point out that we do have our museum in St. Paul, and we have a new storefront museum. And so obviously our exhibits in the museum go into a lot more detail than what we can cover in these presentations. So I certainly invite any of our participants today to come visit our museum in St. Paul. So we're going to get started here. And we'll start with some of that early Hmong history in Minnesota. And so the first Hmong refugees who arrived in Minnesota, that was the winter of 1975, 1976. And the communists, they took over Laos when the Vietnam War ended, and that was in the spring of 1975. And then the Hmong refugees who had fled Laos, they moved to refugee camps in Thailand. And the first of them arrived in Minnesota. That was going to be December of 1975, January of 1976. And we do know who the first Hmong refugee to be resettled in Minnesota was. That's been documented by Dr. Chia Vang in her book, Hmong in Minnesota. And so it was Dang Her. Dang Her and his wife, Shua Mua, were the first Hmong resettled in Minnesota, and that was December 1975. And Dang Her had connections with the US government during the war effort in Laos. And he was sponsored by a co-worker from Minnesota who had worked with him during the war years. And so you see in that reproduction of the Minneapolis Star. So when we did the research for our exhibits, that was the earliest story when we could, I think the Hmong made the front page of one of the mainstream papers that we could find anyway. And that was in January 3rd, 1979, the Minneapolis Star. So the Hmong were at the top of the front page, the story of the Hmong resettlement. And it so happens that Dang Her is in that story. So you see Dang Her's picture there. And I would point out, he was an early community leader, and he actually passed away just a few months ago. I would point out, though, that there were some Hmong nurses who were trained in Minnesota in the late 1960s. So they, they did not move to Minnesota permanently, but there were some Hmong nurses who were trained in Minnesota in the late 1960s during the war effort. So we're going to move on here. So just move something. Give me a second here. Now, this reproduction here you see is from the old St. Paul Dispatch newspaper. So that was the afternoon newspaper in St. Paul. And there were so many Hmong moving to St. Paul in the fall of 1980 that the St. Paul Dispatch actually did a 20-page pullout section just on this Hmong, the new Hmong community and the resettlement. And you can see the section was titled "Looking in at Culture Shock, Hmong St. Paul's New Minority." And so the first big year of the resettlement was so it was kind of slow from 1976 through 78, but then the first big year, really big year, was 1979, and there were more than 1,000 Hmong resettled in Minnesota, Hmong refugees. But 1980 was just huge, and so there were almost 3,000 Hmong resettled in Minnesota in 1980. And actually, we in our archives library, we do have this full 20-page section that the St. Paul Dispatch did, and it does cover a lot of the really early sort of resettlement adjustment concerns and issues. It was the early community experienced resentment, racism, discrimination, and crime. There's also, so many people, started coming by 1980 that housing needed to be found, social service, finding schools and so on were issues. All right, so we're going to move to the next slide here. And I'm going to let Champal jump in here. And Champal, I'd like you to talk about your early experiences when you came to Minnesota for a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. You see the picture that I'm in front of the class. Not just for fun. It's more like seriously because I need to help the elderly and young who don't know to speak English. So that's why my role teaching in front of the class. So Mark already mentioned about the early the Hmong came to Minnesota and come to the United States. It's more likely we, like I mentioned earlier, we die today or die tomorrow. That's why the Hmong have been flee from Laos to Thailand and come to the United States in the fall of 1975. So Deng He is one of the first few Hmong who served during the Vietnam War. He also be able to speak English, and that's why he and a few people who are the first few people come to the United States and follow in the 80s. There were many Hmong soldier and commander who not experienced speaking English, but they are experienced work and fought in the front line. So they will come later in many Hmong who come to Minnesota and other states in the early time. Many people know that it's difficult time for the Hmong community who arrived in between 85 and 75, 76. Those time it's more like the brand new country to the Hmong community. I always present and tell to many people that more like we came from the mountaintop down to the modern country. For we coming from the Stone Age to the computer age. So totally different. So that's one thing. When we hear many young who facing discrimination, the reason is during the Vietnam War and Pearl Harbor happened. So many people who live in the state of Minnesota, they don't know who are the Hmong. They thought we were Japanese or we were Vietnamese. So because of Vietnamese that fought this United States soldier in South Vietnam, they thought we were Viet Cong or Vietnamese or North Vietnam. And the other we facing is during the Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So that's when they thought we were Japanese. So that's why we facing discrimination, young to old. But Mark already mentioned a little bit a section in there that many social worker, teacher, nurse, they don't know who we are. One thing is we have limited people who can speak English and translate to them. So that's why many Hmong have been facing tough issue after we came to the United States. But we can hang on. This thing we can learn and we can move on. So it's time move on. Hmong slowly adapted to a new environment and new languages, a new place. So as far as now, the Hmong doing well. And I believe that the Hmong who come to Minnesota in the 80 to 90 to 2000, Hmong concentrate in the metro region only. St. Paul, Minneapolis, North Minneapolis, and South Minneapolis only. But after 2000, many young Hmong who well educated and got better job, they moved into suburban city that are next to these two metro cities. So that's what the Hmong has been expanding and try to live the way that what they want. So that is what one thing. And to this slide, many older Hmong who came to the United States without go to school. They cannot go to school in Laos because their parents, they were farmers. And many of their father is served in the country, so leaving mom and children behind. So they Their job is work hard in the farm, bring more food for the family. So when they come to the United States, since 80 to 90, many of them, they cannot speak English. So when 96, I'm the first Hmong teaching English or bilingual to the citizenship student. And I also teaching in Hmong, but translate in English into Hmong version. So I teach in 2 different class for 2 different level people, more like older and younger who cannot speak English, and older who cannot speak English but require a translator. So I was teaching in Hmong into the Hmong student in the class, and English version into the Hmong student in the class. So this time I'm teaching from 96 up to today. Mark and myself, we still sharing, teaching the English version in the class, because many of our Hmong men and women who come here, they want to become US citizen. So they want to have the right to vote and choose who they want, and they can benefit of traveling outside the United States back to Laos, so they can have US passport rather than just a visa only. So that's what many think, that many Hmong refugee, they come to the United States, they promise that they're gonna be US citizen and help the United States. So that's what we teaching citizenship class here, and we're helping them, and not just only the Hmong community. In the English class, we have many different community, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Lao, Somali, and Hispanic community, and many other different community too. So the English version, but the Hmong version, particularly only for Hmong community who elderly, who cannot speak English, but they need a translator according to federal guideline for anyone who come to the United States, 15 years, live in the United States 15 years, and the age over 55 years old. They can bring a translator along with them and go translate when they interview in the USCIS office. Other than that, they have a form they call medical waiver. That means if they cannot speak English, but they have problem with their health issue, then they need to see the psychologist doctor. So that is 2 type that they require an individual can bring a translator with them. So that's what we're doing. And I'm glad that Mark and we have been serving in the Hmong Cultural Center side by side. So we co-present to any group. So Mark will be the one who research it and put together. So I will be the one who answer other questions that they have and the reason behind anything. So I will be the one who answer.
All right, thank you, Shampao. And so I just want to clarify. So Shampao was the first citizenship teacher at Hmong Cultural Center. So we started the organization, or I didn't start it, we weren't there yet, but 1992. So we celebrated our 30th anniversary a few months ago. So we added a citizenship class back in 1996, and Shampao was our first citizenship teacher. So he's been with the organization for quite some time. And we're going to move to the next slide here. And just sort of to keep going sequentially here. So this chart does show how many Hmong refugees were resettled in Minnesota every year, starting in 1979. And you can see it went up and down throughout the 80s into the early to mid 90s. And then it stopped by the mid 90s. And so what happened was, at that time, the refugee camps in Thailand closed. So there were a couple of refugee camps where Hmong were living in Thailand, and they had all closed by the mid 90s. And I want to get to the next slide here. And so I'll just show this again. So you see it shoots up again in 2004 and 2005 and 2006. So that's going to be related to this slide. And so there was another group of Hmong refugees from Laos. Some of you may remember seeing this in the news. There was another group of Hmong refugees from Laos who were still stuck in Thailand when those refugee camps closed. And many of them had left Laos later. Some of them had continued they were still in the jungles fighting the communists throughout maybe the 80s and early 90s in some cases. So they were given shelter in this Buddhist temple in Thailand. It was not a formal refugee camp, so it was not United Nations sanctioned. So by 2003, there were 16,000 Hmong refugees from Laos living in this Buddhist temple in Thailand called Wat Tam Krabak. So you see the photo of the temple there. And so the Hmong community in the US was fearful that the Thai government was going to send these people back, repatriate them back to Laos. So there was a successful effort for another resettlement. And that resettlement was announced in the end of 2003. And it started in June 2004. And you can see on there again, 2004 was the biggest year ever for the Hmong refugees. So they coming to Minnesota. So all those people that year, they were coming from that temple. So that continued to 2006. And there were 16,000 Hmong living in that temple, and 6,000 of them were resettled in Minnesota, and many were resettled by family members. I think Champao, his family helped sponsor some relatives. So that was the last large group of Hmong refugees from Laos to be resettled in Minnesota. And what I do want to note, though, is the community is still growing a lot. So there hasn't been any major groups of refugees since, that resettlement that ended in 2006 or 2007. But we have a lot of Hmong immigrants. So these are not refugees, they're immigrants, but they're coming primarily from Laos and Thailand. Many are marriage partners among Americans. So the Hmong Americans are going over to Laos, Thailand, both Hmong American men and women. They're finding a husband or wife, they're bringing them back here, but there's also just family reunion immigration. So the Hmong population of Minnesota, the 2010 census, it had it at 66,000. That's just over 10 years ago, 66,000. Now we think we're over 90,000 Hmong in Minnesota, possibly more. And we're still waiting for the official census 2020 census data to come out. So we see these all the time in our ESL citizenship classes at the center. We have a lot of newcomers from Laos and Thailand, and even some from Vietnam, Hmong from Vietnam. So the community does continue to grow quite a bit. So Champao, do you have anything to add on that?
Oh, you're doing good.
Do you want to add anything about the Wat Tam Krabak resettlement?
Well, the Wat Tam Krabak, the last group of Hmong coming from Wat Tam Krabak, I have a sponsor, my relative, and I have my other two brothers sponsor our cousin, and my father sponsor his own brother. The last wave of Hmong refugee, they require to have family sponsor. But the two other big agency who will be the one who resettle these refugee come to Minnesota. So that's what the last group. So they require to have that. So that is the last wave of Hmong refugee from Laos to stay in Thailand. Otherwise, no more Hmong refugee from Laos to live in Thailand. There were Hmong live in Thailand. That is Hmong Thai. It's not Hmong from Laos. So that's just want to clarify that Hmong in Thailand, they will live in the northern part of Thailand. So this group coming from Wat Tam Krabak, like Mark mentioned in the picture here, is Hmong refugee. For Hmong refugee who live in the camp, and the camp has been closing down, and the reason is they're leaving their family behind. They're still waiting for their family to come to Thailand and enjoy with them. But due to the time when their family come to Thailand, the United States not accepting any newcomer to the United States. So they stuck in there, so they couldn't find any place to go. So that's why they moved into the Tangkabok, the temple. So that's what their temporary, or it could be their permanent home, live in Tangkabok. But in the 2003, the Thai government, they demanding the State Department to accepting this last remaining Hmong refugee from Laos. So 2004, the State Department agreed, and that's why the last Hmong refugee from Tangkabok come to the United States as the last group of Hmong refugee from Thailand.
Thank you, Sean Paul. We're going to move on here. So we're going to talk about some of the milestones and achievements of the Hmong American community here. And obviously, there's not that much we can talk about in a short presentation like this. But a couple things we're going to focus on. One is elected officials and people running for elected office. So in 1991, Chua Lee was the first Hmong elected to any office in the United States. And so she won a seat on the St. Paul School Board way back in 1991. And in 2002, Ming Mo was the first Hmong American elected to a state legislature in the United States. So she was a state senator in Minnesota. I believe she stepped down in 2011. And here I want to point out, we got this is Minnesota State Representative Fu Lee. So he was sworn in 2017. He is still serving in office. He represents North Minneapolis. And here we have a list here. This was up to date until last November. And now there's it's actually getting really crazy now. There's so many people, so many Hmong running for office and winning office that it's, this is in our museum, and we're debating if we're going to keep updating this every election or not. So currently there are 9 Hmong serving in the Minnesota State Legislature. There were 6 before November, and now there are 9. And so there are 3 in the state Senate and 6 in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And Minnesota is the only state where Hmong have been elected to the state legislature. And in California and Wisconsin, Hmong have been elected to city councils and school boards. So several Hmong have been elected to school boards, city councils in Minnesota, as you can see on the list there. Now, one notable milestone, though, and this is in California, is Sheng Tao was elected mayor of Oakland, a pretty large city, in just this past November. And there are also 3 Hmong judges in Minnesota. They're all serving in Ramsey County. All right. Now we'll talk a little bit about Hmong businesses in Minnesota. So the first Hmong businesses in Minnesota, they did emerge in the 1980s near the state capitol on University Avenue in St. Paul. And actually that is where Hmong Cultural Center is. We're just 4 blocks from the state capitol on University Avenue. And so that the University Avenue would be, I think, the original Hmong business district. It was not just Hmong businesses, though. It's some Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotians, and Southeast Asian business district, including some Hmong businesses. There are still several Hmong businesses on University Avenue, but they have spread out to the east side of St. Paul, and then also Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park. Definitely have a number of Hmong businesses. And then if you haven't been to the call it flea markets, I highly recommend it when you're visiting St. Paul. And so the first one was Hmong. The first one to be built was Hmong Town Marketplace. You see the photo there. So Hmong Town Marketplace, it was developed in 2004 by entrepreneur Tua Shong. And so that was like in St. Paul, that was the first Hmong flea market. And then and there are just lots of produce stands, a lot of small businesses. There's a bookstore in there, and there's a food court. But in 2010, an even larger flea market was established, and that's Hmong Village. That's over on the east side of St. Paul. It was started by Yi of Bang. So Hmong Village, it's got everything Hmong Town has, but it does have a larger food court. So I haven't been there maybe the last few years, more than a couple times, but they did have a few years ago the 15 restaurants in there, so definitely worth a visit, both Hmong Town and Hmong Village. And Shampal, you want to add anything on businesses?
Well, this is the community-based, more likely market for individual who just stop one place and get everything for the two Hmong business place. But there were other Hmong, smaller, more like grocery store and other, they were surrounding in the east side of St. Paul too. So that's one thing that the Hmong work by hand as far as since Hmong came to the United States, many Hmong has been achieved more than what we have been taught to. So there were individual Hmong business person, they were doing others business more like real estate and other business that run back and forth in town here and across overseas. So that's what that individual Hmong who has been making a lot of things that we never thought before. So that is one thing. So this is the two flea market here. It's that all you can come into St. Paul and can go see and witness that there were Hmong business in town here. And plus that many Hmong who came from other states, they still want to come to see these two Hmong town place here too. So that is one thing that if you come into St. Paul, please feel free to stop by this two place. They were more like Chinatown, but this is we call Hmong Town, more like a business place. So people can come in here, one stop, buy everything here.
Thank you, Shampal. So this is our final slide, and St. Paul does have the largest number of Hmong businesses of any city in the U.S. And many Hmong also do farm and sell produce at farmers markets across the Twin Cities area. And actually, Shampal and his family. So if you were to go to the St. Paul Farmers Market downtown, you would during the warmer months, you would often see Shampal and his family there.
Yes. One good thing, Hmong, I always talking about Hmong parents, when they were in the old country, they were farmers. So when they come to the United States, especially my father, he's a farmer, but he served as a civics leader in the old country, but he worked in the field, bring food to feed the family. So when we arrived in the United States in fall of 1984, November 1984, and spring 1985, my uncle already here and he worked in the manufacturer and he also farming. So my dad enjoyed working in the farm during springtime and summertime. So no matter what, he just used by hand to like he used to work in old country. So since being here, we try to help our parents and be teaching our parents how they work and feed the family in the old country. So that's what we try to helping our parents, how they work, how keep up their crop growing and bring, sell in the store, St. Paul Farmer Market and Minneapolis Farmer Market too. So my parents, they bring their produce, sell to this store. I believe many of you, if you live outside the Twin Cities here, you never see fresh produce grown in Minnesota and bring to the market. Please, during the summertime, you can stop by in the Twin Cities here in St. Paul and Minneapolis Farmer Market. We bring more fresh vegetable from growing from Minnesota, sell very cheap in these two stores. So that's what they have, all kind, onion, lettuce, cabbage, corn, all the things that we can plant in Minnesota. So one of the most important thing, many of my customers, they were to canning their tomato. So that's what in Minnesota, and we can plant tomato, and we can plant cucumber, so all kind of vegetable for the people who want to buy fresh from the farm and also grow in Minnesota, rather than they go to Cup Food and other grocery store that import from other state or from other country. So this is the summertime. Many of our customers who come to buy their produce from the to market here, they always return and they always enjoy eating fresh fruit from the market. So this is what many Hmong farmers who work, they never getting tired during the summertime, and they bring their produce to sell in the market every Saturday and Sunday. So I invite you, if you have time, you can come into the St. Paul Farmer Market and Minneapolis Farmer Market. And also Hmong Town also have outside market too. So there were Hmong farmer, they bring their produce sell in the market in Hmong Town too. So please feel free to stop by and check to see what you experience seeing the Hmong farmer bringing the fresh from the farm to sell in the market. So that would be one thing that it's worth it for you to come see.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. So just a couple other points here. I've been collecting the census data for about almost 25 years on the Hmong community. And I've seen a real change over time in terms of occupations and professions. So if you go back to the 90s, people were primarily working in manufacturing and assembly, and maybe even 50% of the population, both men and women primarily in that position, or the manufacturing assembly, men somewhat higher than women. But there's been a real change over time in the past couple of decades, and people, the community is really moving into a lot of other professions. And education is one, social services. There are many Hmong who work in the health and medicine now. And also, there's quite a few Hmong lawyers. There's a Hmong Bar Association in the Twin Cities. And then I think we mentioned this in an earlier presentation, but the Twin Cities does have the largest Hmong population of any metro area in the US. I mean, by far. Now it's probably around 90,000 now. So the closest is Fresno, California. And again, we're still waiting for that 2020 census, but Fresno may not even be quite as half as many as in the Twin Cities here. So it's a very dynamic community, and due to its size and diversity, and it's a very dynamic media environment. So there is actually there are at least three Hmong radio stations. It's kind of hard for me to keep up. So I think there are three, and several. They have AM stations, but then they have like FM, FM signals now too. Some of them do, and then there were three newspapers. I think we're down to two. I think one of them, the Hmong Pages newspaper, since the pandemic, we have not seen new issues from that one, but there's still Hmong Times and Hmong Today. And there are several TV, YouTube stations as well. So it's a very, as I said, very dynamic media environment on the local scene here. And many of those stations, they do have, of course, they have Hmong audiences with the internet well beyond Minnesota and even beyond the United States. So probably anything you want to add? That's our last part of
Oh, you're doing a good job, Mark.
Great. All right, well, thank you. I guess we'll turn it over to the Q&A part of the workshop.
Who has questions? Hetty's asking, are the Hmong farmers using organic methods of production?
Usually, many of them, the organics farming is they need to require to have a totally land that's away from the major cornfield. And also they need to have more like a set of fertilizer specific for that. So it's hard for them. But for many Hmong farmers, they use other generic fertilizer that they not spray on the top, but they plant when they plant the plant. So they not spraying anything. So that's what they use, because many farmers, they not use tractor, they use by hand only. So they just use small amount fertilizer when they plant their crop only.
I can talk a bit more about this. So my parents they kind of what Zong Pao and Dr. Pfeiffer mentioned earlier, that a lot of Hmong people love to farm, and that's kind of something they gravitate towards. And my parents are the same, no less. And so in our backyard, back in our home in Brooklyn Center, my parents grow their own vegetables, and as a means of fertilization, we grow chickens, and we use the chicken poop to kind of fertilize the crop so that it grows more. And my dad's not one to waste, and so when we eat watermelon in the summertime, all the rinds go to the garden. All of our fruits and things like that we don't use go to the garden. And if foods that we don't finish or foods that are going to be going to waste, we feed that to our chickens or to our pigeons or quails, so that kind of nothing really goes to waste. And so if you're looking at a smaller scale of produce, most of the time it's organic.
Thank you for asking that question too. Any other question that we might think of, we can tell you guys.
There's one in the
I believe there were Hmong farmer in Marshall, Wonago, and Hmong farmer in Winona, Hmong farmer in Rochester, and many, the most Hmong farmer live in the transition here. And Hmong farmer, they bring their produce, not just only the two St. Paul Farmer Market and Minneapolis Farmer Market, they go to other Buffalo market and other market in Western Wisconsin too. So that's why they bring their produce to other city that they want to have the Hmong to sell their produce there. Red Wing and Shakopee, Savage, Apple Valley, and down to New Prague and many other cities, smaller city around the Twin Cities here. There were Hmong farmer selling their produce over there too.
And actually, I think Hmong farmers are slowly making the news of getting more acres of land. I think just this past November, about 16 Hmong families kind of coordinated like 155 acres of land in the Vermilion Township up in the Dakota County. So that that's kind of a huge milestone for us right now, that the Hmong people have a huge part of land to farm. And that's not just one family, it's 16 different Hmong families.
Can I say something?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for an excellent presentation. I had an earlier question in the chat in terms of when I was teaching Asian American Studies at St. Cloud State, and this is early 2010s. Many Hmong students did not know about the secret war. So I said, go and maybe go, if you want, interview your parents. And this was the first time they had heard of it. Is that still the case, do you think, with our second, third generation Hmong students?
Yes, many of our young Hmong, they don't know the secret war in Laos. But for many who born in Laos and raised in Thailand and come to the United States, they just say the Vietnam War and the Vietnam War, they fought each other in Laos. But they don't know that that is the secret war. They refer that Vietnam War and Lao War only.
Thank you. If I can just do a few words here, especially to Hmong Student Association organization, HSO. Thank you so much for being part of this. Dr. Dia Cha is a friend and a colleague, and she is so proud of you. So just know that that is so, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Cindy
Thank
and
you.
Mike.
I think there's another question in the chat says that where are the Hmong restaurants we can eat at? It depends on what you're talking about. If you're looking for Hmong food by Hmong people throughout the St. Paul area, but there's a lot of other places now. There's a cafe in St. Paul, 36 Cafe. They make pancakes, salads, and little cute things that you can post on social media, but they're owned by Hmong people. There's boba places owned by Hmong people, right? And as we're a growing community, a lot of us are starting to branch out to different towns. So we have Rocky's Bistro in Blaine. We have, I think, Red's Kitchen also in Blaine, right? So originally from St. Paul, now we're branching out to Blaine. We're branching out to Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center. And slowly, like, we're making the news. And a lot of our foods are more infusions of foods, right? So things that are soul foods to us, we're infusing it with an American cultures or American styles or Thai influences, Vietnamese influences. And so there's a huge community out there. So it just really depends on what Hmong restaurants you're looking for.
One thing that I want to add a little bit for minority mentioned about, if you go to those two Hmong town market, you will see Hmong, real Hmong food. That way you can see finger food. That's what I'm gonna say. Eggo and many stuff that Hmong has been cooking there, similar to Hmong what Hmong American eat today.
There aren't any, seems like there's a question in the chat. There aren't any Hmong restaurants in St. Cloud. There is a town market, which sells ingredients to make Hmong food. We used to have the Vietien restaurant, but now that they are now closed, but we used to eat there a lot, kind of just to get a taste of home. But a lot of the students up here do more home cooking. And then if you guys are interested in the Hmong Student Organization Culture Night that's happening April 8th, we are providing foods that are very close to our hearts. And so if you're looking to get a taste of Hmong food locally, come see us April 8th.
Does anyone else have questions?
Sure, I've got one. As a teacher, I'm always wanting to connect kids with literature. And so often we see books that are written like about cultures, but not by people who are actually from the culture. Now, I would love to know, like, what Hmong written books would you recommend for like the kindergarten through 8th grade crowd?
Well, in St. Paul, in the past, St. Paul Public School, they're creating some more like a dictionary book that is for students who live in St. Paul, and they distribute to the community. For example, Hmong Cultural Center already partnered with that. So we help them to create that book. That would be a more like dictionary picture book. That's the other thing that explained in Hmong and English version. And there were some small folktale book that are written by St. Paul Public School in the early 90s. So that would be the more like specific school that they bring that book to more like a Hmong school. That is St. Paul Public School in the East South St. Paul. So that's one thing that there have been specific school, and any other school they want to come and join it, they can come in to join with the adventure, with the Hmong book and reading and about the Hmong community, and more like the Cinderella book and any book that write about Hmong history. And that's what be something that in St. Paul Public School here, they're already having in the early 90s and late 90s.
Yeah, I want to add, so we do have a comprehensive library, the children's section in our center in St. Paul here. And there have been a number of books over the years by Hmong publishers. And what I would recommend, there's a company called Hmong Resource, HER, Hmong Education Resources, HER. So they are very, very active the last 5 years or so, and they're publishing stuff all the time. So they have quite a few children's titles by Hmong authors. They're by some of them are bilingual, or they're both in Hmong and English. So it's HER, Hmong Education Resource Publisher, would be a good place to start.
Thank you to both of you.
I did see another question about it says, what are some ways that we in northern Minnesota can connect with Hmong cultures? And I'm wondering if Sean Power might not have a response for that.
Well, I believe might not live closer there. So the student association, they can help out. Otherwise, we can more likely. I has been in Big Lake School District many years ago because the Hmong population has been moving up to the township. So I've been working with the school district and to plan how they can better serve the Hmong children. And when they move up there, because they see facing that Hmong student has been enrolled into the school. So they want to understand that how they can prepare for better serve when the Hmong student come into their school district. So I've been in there during the summertime many years ago, help them and how they can understand, preparing to help the Hmong children and with Hmong parents who move into your area. So that's what I've been in Big Lake School District many years ago. So I believe that the Hmong Student Association in St. Cloud, and they can help you as give you the idea and what they experience in town here, and they can bring their brainstorm to help out you. Or otherwise, I can find a time. We can set out a time. So when I have time, I can come up there and talk a little about Hmong history. And when the Hmong kindergarten, first grade and second grade, when they enroll into the school, what reaction when they see the teacher talk to them, and when their parents come and see and with one-on-one with the teacher conference, what do they expecting to from the teacher, and what's the teacher expecting to see and to have from their parents. And the other thing is how and when that they seen that the children need help in terms of during the flu season. There were many different things like we talk about Hmong herbal helping the student in the early, like our first present. So that would be something that we will set up a time if you need help from my perspective. Otherwise, Maina and the Hmong student in St. Cloud, they can help you guys.
And I also would add, we're working on virtual, one of our big projects this year at the Hmong Cultural Center Museum is we got a grant. We're working on virtual field trips. So we hope to roll that out by this fall. And then we can hopefully reach many more than can come down just to St. Paul and see us.
Yeah, I think in northern Minnesota, from like a university student's perspective, I think the best way to do it is to connect to the students at the universities. We have an organization here at St. Cloud. I know there's one at St. John's and St. Ben's. I know there's a couple of students at the U of M Morris school as well. I don't know if they have an organization there, but I know there's students there. And I think we're just a little shy. Once the further we get from the cities, the bit more timid we get. But I think it's just, you just ask around and definitely someone will come from within the Hmong community.
Heidi asked about Heidi. You asked about Hmong.
Yeah.
Hmong bookstore. Yes,
Yeah.
Hmong bookstore in the Hmong ABC bookstore is in the town market, and also Hmong herbal that they plant during the winter time in the greenhouse. And they also brought the herbs to sell in the Hmong market too.
Yeah, and we actually do have some pretty good research papers that have been published the last few years at our library that do go, if you really want to know in depth about some of those, the more common herbs that Hmong Americans, that they grow and use. I think there's at least 2 research papers on that topic that go in pretty in depth on that we have at our library.
If there's no other questions, last call. I think we will wrap it up. And I just want to thank you all so much. Thanks, Chong Pao. Thanks, Dr. Pfeiffer. Thanks, Mina and the student organization and everybody who's participated in these really fascinating sessions and given us a glimpse into this very large community in our state that it's important to know some more about. So we appreciate our sponsors and everybody, and appreciate all of you coming. Hetty mentioned a bus trip or something to the Hmong marketplace. I mean, it's not a bad idea. So discussions will be had. But again, just want to say thanks to everybody. Thanks, Anne Marie, for putting this together. And we're trying to put these on YouTube. We're struggling, but we'll get them up there in the next week or so. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.